welcome to the first in a series of UK-wide discussions about the BBC. My name is Diane Kemp. I'm a professor at the Sir Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity here at Birmingham City University, and I'll be chairing this event today. Whether you're in this space or following us online, please do use the hashtag. We'll be keeping an eye on it. The hashtag is #MyBBC, and join in the conversation. Any comments will be really interested in what you have to say. Because our overall aim for this whole run of panels is to get young people particularly, but people engaged with the future of the BBC, to feel that that matters to them, okay, to see how it affects you and encourage you to speak out and offer ways of improving it. Why not? It's our BBC, folks. According to some research that was out in October 25, I'm going to give you the quote here, trends show young people are engaging less with content from public service media. BBC, of course, public service broadcaster. Young people more likely to watch YouTube than broadcast television. They now have more choice of content than ever before from streaming platforms, social media, gaming, and other new forms of technology. And a digital future created with young people for young people is going to be the aim. Okay, quick hands up round the audience here of our lovely BCU students. How many people here, just hands up, watch, listen or read the BBC daily? That's 3 out of 6, half of you. Okay, it's a good point to start from. So thank you. We'll be coming back to you, not just for polls like that, but also for some comments in a bit. Always important to remember, folks, just as a background, that the BBC is about to get a new royal charter. So, unlike other broadcasters, the BBC is paid for by the licence fee, which we will pay for if we have televisions, and because it's publicly funded, it's required to ensure that it takes all of the UK into account. That's us included. And it's all written down in the Royal Charter, and that is renewed every 10 years, and that new charter is being drafted now. The formal consultation is over, but we at the Lenny Henry Centre, also the Media Reform Coalition, and associated other groups, and the Students' Union here, we're all concerned to make sure that whether the formal consultation has finished or not, young people's views are listened to and taken note of. So that's part of what we're doing here today. So in today's panel, we want to get your thoughts on the relevance of the BBC to you, ask what would make it even better, what would make the other three of you think, yeah, I go there every day as well. And we're going to discuss issues specifically about representation and diversity and its impact on making the BBC more relevant to us all. Okay. Now we've got some brilliant speakers lined up. Yes, that is you. I'm going to introduce them in a moment, but first, let's have a word from the two organisations who are helping to set up this event today. So from the BCU Students' Union, can I get Dan Richards to come in and just introduce why is the SU involved?
So for us as a students' union, student voice and the representation of students is very much at the heart of what we do across the board, not just in conversations like this. So to be offered the chance by the Sir Lenny Henry Centre and also by the university to give students even more of an opportunity to talk about something as fundamental as you've pointed out, Diane, as the BBC, as the ongoing commitment from the BBC to support young people as well, is incredibly important. So we're really proud to be part of that conversation today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And it's also co-organised by the Sir Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity, and the director is Jaldeep Katwala. Jaldeep, hello. Tell us why the LHC, as we refer to it, is involved in this.
I think it's because we want to give talented people the opportunity to rise. And that's in the BBC, it's everywhere in media. But in this case, it's the BBC. You, in 15 years' time, should be high up in the BBC. And if not, why not? That's what we want to know.
Thank you. In the meantime... Dun, 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 dun. Drum roll, anyone? Can I just say, folks, we are small but perfectly formed. It is absolutely brilliant, and thank you all for being here today. But thank you too to my star-studded guests who are here to talk about all sorts of things. They've got kind of oodles, if that's a word. Is that a word, Noosh?
Yeah, of course.
It's a word. Oodles of kind of expertise and information research to offer here to this discussion. So first, Anusha Baghdadi. Noosh, tell us who you are and why you're here.
Yep. Hi, I'm Anusha Hagdadi. I'm the head of research at Beat Freaks. Beat Freaks is a research and insight agency founded in Birmingham, from basically the really simple idea of what would happen if young people had their fair share of power, and we just took that idea and ran with it. So I'm here to talk a bit about research that we have just completed for the BBC.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Nina Robinson sitting next to you. Nina, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Nina Robinson, and I think the most important thing that you should know about me is that I'm from Walsall in the West Midlands, and I went to a comprehensive school, and both my parents were working in factories, and from there, like normal comprehensive school, I got a place to study at Oxford University. So from a very working class upbringing, I was kind of put into very elite spaces, meeting very different people, and it really did change the trajectory of my life. And I think that really impacted my career. So I had a long career at the BBC, over 15 years as a journalist and documentary maker. But my experiences as a woman of colour, working class background, and, with a Brummie accent, that really has shaped my perspective and how I think about the BBC and the media landscape in the UK.
Fantastic, thank you. She's also hiding some of her lights under various bushels there. Major researcher in this field, and podcaster, all sorts of organiser, producer. She's done loads of things. We'll hear more about that shortly. And shouldn't it be a Walsall accent rather than a Birmingham accent? We'll come back to that. And at the end here, let's introduce Love Sega. And Sega, you're going to tell us a bit about yourself and why you're here?
Yeah, I'm a musician and artist, and that's my full name, Love Sega. And interestingly, when it comes to the BBC, as a performer, as an artist, I've been on the other side, on the camera front-facing side. I've been on the radio, I've been on the TV, I've worked with the BBC orchestras, performed with them, and I actually been on BBC News as well with some of my creative work with Live and Breathe, where people of colour, black voices in Southwark and Lambeth talk about the need for clean air through art. So in this period of time, we've got the Charter, but then also the Director General stepped down, and then there was a chance for a new director, somebody to apply. So I actually applied for the role of Director General.
Excellent.
And I think the interesting thing is, for me, and to have this conversation with young people, it's no good saying, oh, young people, you have a future, but then in terms of the processes aren't transparent. So me trying to run is to try and make this transparent and to say that actually you should have a voice in this, even from the start of the appointment process.
I'm sure we're going to come back to this, and they're going to each talk about various aspects. And so time for questions, absolutely. So please keep them in mind. But just while we're on you, Sega, I believe the BBC has just announced who the new Director General of the BBC is. So the Director General runs the top of that kind of chart, if you like, who runs the BBC. And it's not you, no. I know. It's not me either. Not that I put in for it. It is Matt Britton, and very widely kind of touted as the person who was going to get it. I think many of us might have seen some information about him over the last few weeks. So perhaps we'll come back to that decision a bit later in this discussion. And welcome to some more of our colleagues who've joined us. So you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. Now, so quick background on the BBC, various issues that they're facing at the moment, thinking about challenges, and then I'm going to come to you, Noosh, to talk about some of the research you've done that perhaps tackles some of that. If we think about the fact that the BBC, it's funded by us, right? And that's fine. That's a great thing. But if if in the end not enough people of us are watching, listening, or reading the BBC, it becomes a bit harder to kind of say why it's okay for us all to be paying for it. And we are seeing changes in the pattern of young people in particular, but other people as well, sort of, perhaps going elsewhere. There's a part of bigger trends, folks. It's not just to do with the BBC, but clearly it affects the BBC when we're all paying for it. So that is a specific challenge as its license fee and the charter renewal come up for discussion, as you might imagine. Now, I'm guessing that might have been part of the reason why Beatfreaks was asked to be part of this research that was done into I think 18 to 24-year-olds was your
That was
brief,
our
wasn't
bit,
it,
yeah.
Rush? Could you tell us a bit more about this? So the BBC actually did some research with young people to find out, and they are very much in listening mode. They stress that they, paying money to do this research. What did your research tell them?
So let me just set a bit of the context for the unboxed research. So the BBC listened overall to 5,500 16 to 24-year-olds, okay, and that's across 5 different strands of research. A couple of, for those of you that are into research methods, you can nerd out now, but a couple of quantitative surveys and then 3 qualitative pieces of work, and we were one of the qualitative pieces of work. So our brief was to conduct what we call listening labs, kind of like imagine like a souped up focus group. So, but we did that with 244 18 to 24-year-olds. We were really clear that we wanted to do it across the country. So from Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, everywhere we had young people from. And we really put an emphasis, we didn't put an emphasis on having what you would call a representative sample. We always put an emphasis on diversity, because when doing qualitative research, we actually want to know is that where people disagree, like where are the points of resonance. So we had an incredibly diverse group of people. And we did this research November to December last year. Our bit, if you like, was to pick up on various different things, including views of the BBC, what might the future of media look like, representation, kind of short versus long form content. Lots of kind of different, interesting, very relevant pieces, but I only want to talk about a couple of those because I'm actually desperate to hear what these guys have to say as well, and be plenty of time for questions. So I wanted to talk a little bit first about the future of media. We had a very open conversation, right? This was all about we didn't hive off, and we talked about this a bit, didn't we, Diane, about broadcast or TV. We didn't hive that off. We talked about media as a whole. That made for quite a slippery conversation because a lot of people were talking a lot about social media first. That was kind of top of mind, and then pulling it into, okay, well, what streamers are you watching, etc. So what was top of mind when we were talking was authenticity. Loads and loads of young people that we spoke to said we are sick, particularly at that moment, of AI slop. We don't know what's real. Very memorable, made it into the BBC's own report, which I could share the link for. Somebody said, look, unless it's a cat playing a saxophone now, I can't tell sometimes if it's AI. And I was like,
You mean that's not real?
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, okay, that's helpful actually. So this idea of real humans telling real human stories, and that kind of led into their views of the BBC later, because they were very much like, to be fair, this is a place where we kind of trust to not have loads of AI rubbish. Positivity was huge. So a lot, and this again links to representation.
And the lack of positivity.
Yeah, so negative news everywhere, not just on the actual news, but and specifically negative news about young people. At that time, I don't know if you remember, but the news cycle was very much about there's no jobs. It was that there's no jobs for young people, and the young people we spoke to were like, okay, but also, can you show us some young people that are killing it, basically? Can you show us some young people that are building businesses? Can you give us the positives? So some people were following positive news online, just to try and get that balance in there. So on socials.
Authenticity and positivity. I know you've got more to say. I can see a number of people kind of nodding in a sort of, yes, you're absolutely right. Can I just get well, Fiona, you caught my eye, so I'm going to give you the microphone first. What is important about the issue of authenticity? Why is it important to you?
I think it's for me, I want to know that,
Don't worry, let me come back to you. You were nodding, that's why I came to you. And you were certainly nodding yes. So let's take you, and we'll come back to you, Kevin, don't you worry.
I feel like the issue when it comes to the BBC and authenticity is that they may claim that they represent people from different backgrounds, but then as someone who's South Asian and a neurodivergent person, I don't see many neurodivergent people in the media industry, because the fact that if you look at radio, for example, if you can, I want to ask someone to name me one presenter, it can be any station, who's actually neurodivergent, because Asian Network recently, right, has had their represents list. there's now probably one person on that list who probably has a physical disability or an invisible disability. And then sometimes I say to myself, where is that representation? Because it's like, for example, because neurodivergence is still an issue in the South Asian community because there's lack of research and it's still a cultural stigma. I mean, in 2024, BBC News has issued out an article of a Sikh mother who was going through that stigma of like taking their child to the Gurdwara and being judged by the community just because coming from third world countries there isn't that level of research of neurodivergence.
Fantastic, thank you. Anyone else on our authenticity,
love that.
why it's
Thanks.
important? As I say, I saw quite a few nodding. So Hardeep, yeah, just tell us why it's important, and I can come back to you.
Yeah, no worries.
I think obviously with the issues about authenticity, it's more or less around marginalised communities. Of course, Hamza and South Asian communities without doubt. But what about other communities, such as maybe the black community, as well as maybe those who are actually from the Chinese community? A big one of authenticity point of view, especially from the sporting point of view, as much as a sports journalist. What we lack right now is an element of inclusion and diversity within any type of media format, whether it be in the newsroom, whether it be perhaps maybe within media production, or maybe in a sense, society. It's what the BBC needs to actually tackle on, and it needs to be a media change.
Thank you, Hardeep.
Well, can I just come back on that point?
Yes, do.
Because one of the things that I do since I left the BBC at the end of 2020, so my company organises a podcast festival, which is called the Unipod. And for the last couple of years, I've thought that it's, one of the most important panels that I organise is a sports podcast panel. And the idea is that sports podcasting has a particular representation problem. Sports media has been called the white male hegemony, and it hasn't even been able to get gender diversity, gender equity, so let alone like race and disability, neurodivergence. So there's a very particular issue in trying to spotlight sports media. So that's what I try and do on the festival. And I think it's important to have other actors outside of the BBC and the organisation, people doing things on their own platforms, using YouTube and social media, so that it kind of opens up the BBC to all of the talent that is out there.
And we know there's talent because we see it all the time. Another comment about authenticity or the positivity, either one.
I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of talent.
There's a lot of young, talented individuals out there, but if they don't have kind of like a role model, or they see people who are just authentically themselves, they'll kind of just like take the definitions of other people instead of really like seeking creativity and like authenticity from within. So that's why I feel like authenticity should just be promoted more, because it's just not nice seeing like all like the negative stuff. There's a lot of young students, as you said, killing it, doing their thing,
Really.
starting their businesses from the ground up, putting their blood, sweat, and tears and everything, and it's nice being able to see that. So.
Yes, we passed it on, yes.
I think that authenticity as well can also be quite culturally specific. So what's authentic to me as a black British woman might present differently in terms of authenticity to someone who is, I don't know, a bit of a different kind of life experience and different categories and all sorts. So I really do think our identities will kind of play onto what we consider to be authentic.
So can I ask, all of you who've just said that it's important, is that one of the reasons why you don't watch the BBC or you use it less? You're seeking out things that maybe reflect you more? Is that what I'm getting here? Yes, I can see that hand is saying maybe.
Maybe.
Yes?
It's just that more of like, I watch the BBC because it's like, as again, growing up with it as a child, it's like, I watch it, I consume it. I mean, I listen to radio, I get an Asian network, I've been listening to it since, God, I was a child, listening to Bobby Friction and that. But then sometimes I also say to myself, it's like, some of the presenters, I don't relate with them. I don't relate with any presenter. And the fact that we have the Extend program, but then it's like, I feel like there's no Extend program for presenters. I mean, for example, I go to student...
It's an internal BBC programme. Yeah.
Like, for example, I go to Student Radio Association as head of administration at Scratch Radio, and it's like, I've been to that conference, and like, the amount of South Asian representation is minute. And I don't want to exaggerate this. Me and my colleague here, Ria, we were the only ones at that conference, literally. So like the lack of diversity from not just from an administration, like, you know, public sector, but in a community level, it's quite shocking.
Yeah.
There's a clear level of disparity.
I mean, I could quote something from something that Sir Lenny said, which was part of what started the launch of the Sir Lenny Henry Media Centre years and years ago when he was at BAFTA, and he was talking, even then, just 10 odd years ago, I think, he gave the speech. May not be right, that date, but where he said he spent most of the time in television being the only black person in the room, any room. And kudos to him for keeping
Yeah, I
on
mean,
with that.
so my career at the BBC was over 15 years as a journalist and documentary maker, and it was mainly at well, the Music Radio 1 and 1 Extra, but also I spent some time with news gathering. When I came back from abroad, I was working at the World Service, Radio 4. So this area, and also a bit in TV, Newsround and World TV. But the, you know, the experience of that is that certain parts of the organisation are more diverse than others. So 1 Extra was really good. I felt that I could be authentic, like I really felt included as part of that team. But it's very different than Radio 4. And I think international news and current affairs in particular is regarded as quite an elite part of the organisation. So that's why when I left the BBC and I started working with the Lenny Henry Centre and did some research, it was important for me to kind of look at what are the parts of the BBC that actually do have need to work harder on its diversity of its workforce than other parts of the organisation. And that's one of the recommendations here in this alternative green paper.
We'll be coming on to that in a moment. That's a really good point. But can I just come back to you, Noosh, then? I mean, clearly, the research, unsurprisingly, that you did is being echoed here in this room. But really interesting to hear the reasons why, and that the sort of sense of, you know, if I don't recognise myself, or, you know, that kind of thing. What else did you pick up?
Yeah, there's so many points that I've been like storing up to go back. So actually one of the things people are really passionate about, because one of the questions we asked was, how should the BBC work with content creators? And to be honest, that was met with a bit of like, what? Like, I don't know if we're into that until we got into the question of supporting young content creators. And then suddenly it was like, oh, yes, actually, this should be and this just comes back to exactly what you were saying, this should be making opportunities. It should be building pathways. So that was like a real... We also asked everyone what they were watching and listening to, and I built the most elite playlist. I'll share that with you as an aside, because it was great. And then to come back, diversity and inclusion was absolutely huge. Accessibility was huge. So one of the things that I think people felt that social media does really well is actually make things accessible. They're bite-sized. You can have stuff on when you're ironing. You know, you can listen to it, you can watch it. It's captioned properly. That was absolutely massive to have like all of these different ways of consuming stuff. But also, and the thing I kind of want to pull onto, because I feel like we're going to get to this place, is trust and accountability. Future of media, trust and accountability was massive. We talked about trust at loads of different points in the research.
Did people trust the BBC?
Yes, they did, but it was what I basically ended up calling pragmatic trust, which was to say, look, we do trust this more than other stuff, but you've got to be aware what is the other stuff that we're looking at. It really varied on, news was kind of the big kind of trust, not trust killer, but the place where people could most easily see the gap between their own knowledge and experience and kind of what they were seeing on screen. We had amazing conversations about questions of framing, like who, you know, if we're looking at war coverage, for example, who's framed as a victim, who's framed as a villain, language, you know, we were in deep in that kind of conversation. People also very aware that like they're more, in some areas they're just more confident to call things out. So somebody was talking about like, look, I really trust the BBC, but I'm trans, and like I heard like there was this particular incident around that I felt was transphobic, so I don't necessarily trust them for that. So it was pragmatic. It was still their most trusted source. But also, just to come back to what you said about consuming the BBC when young, that there was also a bit of a trajectory. People going, look, you know, we consume CBeebies, we consume bite size. That's what comes to us through school, through education. It's kind of presented as a fountain of truth, and then you get to a point in your life where you start asking questions. You've got social media, you can look at 100 different perspectives on the same thing. So there was kind of this sense of like becoming a more savvy media consumer as well.
So is it all right to just jump in on something? So you mentioned this, the SRA, which is the Student
Radio Association.
Student Radio Association. So I think in terms of Nusha, you mentioned accountability. One of these things, and I think about this a lot as an artist. I mean, I've had things done at the Royal Shakespeare Company, had things at National Gallery. These are old institutions, some old buildings I've gone into where they've still got stolen goods in their space. And it's one of those questions where, do you tear down the whole institution and everything and try and rebuild? Or do you just try and see, now we've got an institution, are there some levers which can be changed to make things a bit more representative? And so in terms of in terms of looking at what is being done, this new Director General, Matt Britton, has 0 broadcasting experience.
But of course, they're pointing to the fact that he's been at Google. He's got fantastic experience of digital.
So, with digital, being a creative person, again coming from music is a cautionary tale where the music, just because the size of the files are so small, they were easy to pirate. So when the internet came along, there was loads of pirating. Music was free. Yep, LimeWire, Napster, all of that. Music was free. And then the streamers came along, and the record labels got into bed with the streamers, and that was meant to be the panacea. And now when we're looking at the streamers where it's impossible, are you hearing through streaming and through the algorithm, is it providing the type of music that you want to listen to? Can musicians make any money from it? So this is a problem. Then you look at film as well. You look at film, and then now it's going the same way where some of the richest people are trying to buy the number of film studios. It's becoming smaller and smaller and smaller.
It's a broader ecosystem we're getting into there. I mean, clearly it has, the BBC is such a major player, it has an impact, but I think there's a broader series of things there that you're quite rightly picking up there, Sega.
There are things, but the BBC itself, as a framework and as an institution, they can take one of you and put you right on Radio 1, because that's what happened with Greg James. So he went straight from student radio to here. So there needs to be some bravery, because they've got the structures there. That's just someone's decision to say, yeah, we can pick this person because they're different and put them there. But there needs to be the groundswell for people to say, actually, let's put ourselves forward to do this. And there should be pressure on the BBC to actually do that.
Right.
Yeah, of course, it
Folks,
takes encouragement from, encouragement from the community. And also, I think the issue when it comes to...
Hang on, hold on 2 seconds, and then you can put that on there. And by the way, don't just feel that you can only wait on everybody in this room. You can also be joining us on hashtag #MyBBCMySay.
Sorry to cut you off there, Diane. Yeah, it's the community. It's like, an organization can only do so much. Like, you as an individual, you also have a role to participate in that as well. And when it comes to content, like you were talking about with music, it's like, I feel like the issue is like, who truly owns the content at the end of the day? Because it's like, when back in the day you can buy a physical CD and knowing that, okay, this is my content. When you're streaming on platforms like Spotify and other platforms are available, it's like you don't truly own your content, because you don't know, one day you could be looking for a particular song and then it just gets struck off because of a record label or because that organization doesn't exist anymore.
I mean,
so,
there is work that needs to be done around the IP and ownership of IP, and I've been to quite a few workshops that have been trying to educate, spread more awareness of your IP and the importance of having it. But I think related to what you were saying in terms of that it's entry level, people putting themselves forward for coming into the organisation. I actually think that the BBC does that really well. It's got a number of different schemes, trainee schemes, it's graduate programmes. I mean, they're excellent programmes, and there's really good kind of diversity. So I don't think there's really a problem, a major problem with either people putting themselves forward or for those people who are coming onto those schemes. For me, the issue is like, how are those people progressing through the organisation? And, I've seen that up close and personal. So, what are the career pathways? So I would argue that from the Asian network, there are very little career pathways out of the Asian network. And, whereas Radio 1, for example, where I worked, there was a very clear pathway for hosts, presenters, journalists moving on to other areas of the organisation. So, you know, there are different things that can be done practically to make the organisation better and be more effective.
Are you talking about systemic changes as opposed to it relying on great people saying, let's do this, because then, of course, they move on, and then unless it's unless it's systematic, the waters kind of close over again, don't they? So is that what you're talking about?
So I'm just saying that there are practical things that the BBC can do, because sometimes you might come across the BBC, like, big exposés that, like, the latest debacle over the use of the N-word at the BAFTAs, and just kind of paint the whole organisation as though, write it off, oh my God, they don't know anything about diversity and they're hopeless, it's a hopeless case. But that's actually not true at all. That they've been doing really good work. They've come a long way in terms of, I just found out today that they weren't even publishing the diversity data until 2017, but now they do publish very detailed workforce diversity data. So we now know how many women are employed by the organisation, whether they're staff, whether they're freelance, whether they're senior leaders, what racial background. They just started recording socioeconomic class of people in senior leadership roles. These are all brilliant kind of things, but because it only started in 2017, there's more now that we can build on and keep doing to make the BBC, continue to be relevant, understand that it's something that we can all contribute to.
Okay, you've got the microphone.
I wanted to talk on something that you said before, on the BBC kind of taking sides on you said something being a bit biased, or like when looking into like global politics and taking like a specific side on issues. And like as a Jewish British girl, I feel like personally I've lost a lot of trust with the BBC because of their lack of kind of honest reporting, with lots of incidents that have happened across the UK, and like anti-Semitic terrorist attacks that have gone on, which happen quite commonly with what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. And I feel like I have lost a lot of trust within the BBC because of lack of wording of specific headlines when looking into...
Is that an authenticity thing? Just trying to link...
But what I'm saying is, like, from working in news, just as you say you have a lack of trust from one side, you'll find, exactly the same on the other side. You'll find many Muslim, Middle Eastern, Arabic that are saying exactly the same thing. And from working there will always be some demonstration outside the organisation from one side or the other, saying that the BBC was, using the wrong language, or they weren't showing one side enough. Various different lobby groups and interest groups. I think that is quite a healthy thing for democracy, that you have different people from different sides of whatever, news or news articles that are running, that are like saying, oh, you're being biased. So if one's saying they're biased and the other one's saying biased, well, I think that's healthy for democracy to show that there's such a plethora of people.
It's not quite just the point, is it? Because that. Well, there may be that there will always be people who think it isn't doing enough for all the right
not being
things.
Fair,
but I think your point was about trust, and trust is, if trust is eroded. So what do you think would be the way round your lack of trust? Could you think of a solution for it? Is it about, and I mentioned the authenticity, because if you felt there were more people who, understood all the issues, is it to do with representation? Just interested in if you think you have a solution to it.
Well, not a complete solution, but I feel like there should be more education on like the context behind these specific things that are going on. And specifically what I was talking about was headlines and the way the BBC specifically words things, and that there should be a bit, like they should look into it more, and I don't know, have more people on their team with background
breadth.
with maybe different opinions, because it's so healthy to have debate and it's so healthy to just not be on one. You can't just be on one side. You have to have a range of different
And I think
backgrounds.
in the research, this was where people were amongst themselves, I think, trying to work out the same thing, like what do we really want it to be? And in some ways, people going, look, the BBC has this stated principle of neutrality, right? But like in some ways, it's easier if you read the Telegraph or the Guardian, because you kind of know where they stand. They've already told you. And actually, sometimes they were like, sometimes we don't see it until we get into the debate. So there was a lot of back and forth about even people in themselves trying to figure out, like, what do we want to see? Like, they wanted to see a range of opinions, actually, they really did, but it was a bit more about, that kind of, how can we make that bridge between the people and the BBC?
Also, I just got quick question, because it's really helpful what you said. So one of the things that happens in this whole conversation is, so my question to you is, do you, because there are two things. Number one, do you think that the BBC needs to change for some reason? Like you said, you've said that as an example, bringing different people or different voices. Or do you think the BBC needs to be shut down? Because what happens is, so which one is it?
I don't think shut down, because that's quite extreme.
Yeah.
And there's always improving for everyone. And just to shut down something is just like, I think that blows it way out of proportion. But definitely just I think more people need to be involved with different knowledge in all these different areas.
We may be addressing that shortly when we come on to Nina, but I've got 3 other people wanting to speak, so thank you very much. That's fantastic. Can I introduce my friend here, and please say what you want to say?
So my name's Sean, and I feel like when it comes to like diversity within like the media industries and companies, I feel like there's like hidden strings that are pulled, not coming to light, of showing this of people that are neurodivergent and diversity, understanding like we have as much power as other people that they would hire. Like, I feel like I would have to work more times as harder than the average person to get to a position that they want to get to, or achieve something that's more exquisite, like be a presenter or own my own show and stuff like that. So I just feel like more media companies should do that before it gets to a point where they may start like having more shadows or hidden stuff to be hidden, and they'll potentially get shut down for stuff that's been revealed.
Thank you. We'll come back to that, I feel certain. Another point.
So I just had a point on the neutrality side of things. This isn't a solution at all, because, I mean, I was very much raised with you can't please all of the people all of the time. But obviously the BBC is, you know, owned by us all, and to try and represent everyone. So I kind of think it's somewhat of an impossible task. However, when it comes to neutrality, sometimes not taking a stand is taking a stand. If you're reporting on something that is obviously transphobic, for example, and you're trying to use neutral language, that it to someone, for example, who maybe is part of the trans community, they would probably see, okay, this terrible thing has happened to someone that is just like me, and you're trying to kind of make it, not really a big deal, or kind of trying to minimize it, for example. So, yeah, sometimes not taking a stand is taking a stand. How you would resolve that, I don't know. But the neutrality side of things, on the other hand, it is what does kind of, for me, build trust. Because I know that it's not taking a side, and they're not trying to, they're not trying to push you a certain way, so I'm probably going to believe it more. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting. There's two sides to that.
More than two, I should think. Before we come back to you, one more comment, and then come back to you, Nina. And Sega's not had a chance to introduce her. We'll get to Sega as well in a moment. But Paras, please, your point.
With the going back to everyone's bias, with the bias with the BBC, sorry, is this work? Hello?
Jason?
Yeah, it's working. I've noticed that when it comes to like representing different political viewpoints, there has been quite a certain bias to, Reform UK especially. I mean, the amount like you go see on Question Time, plenty of times they always have a member of Reform UK on, or someone from the Tory party or the Labour Party, but there are so many other.
Isn't it important that we hear from all the parties, do you think?
That's the thing. We don't actually hear from all the parties. I mean, when was the last time you heard something about the Lib Dems beyond all the antics Ed Davey has to do to, get any attention? Or, I mean, we sometimes get the Greens, but I don't think we get as much representation of the Greens on the BBC or from the SNP or.
I mean, I think
Loads of
that's
views.
basically the after effects of the Brexit vote, and so that's still very much being felt at the BBC that, they missed the signs that the Brexit vote was going to go that way. And so then to overcompensate, it was like, oh, we need to kind of make sure that the news coverage, that we're covering everybody. But I think that kind of emphasises the importance of having a diverse workforce within the BBC.
Can I just say that's the most fantastic link into what I'm going to ask you to talk about next, actually, Nina. Thank you for everyone's comments. We'll come back to you in a moment. But can I just get you to... So first of all, Noosh, thank you. Thank you. It is fantastic, let me say, to have all of the kind of richness of comments and that sense in which, anybody who thinks young people either aren't involved or engaged or don't know, the detail and depth and passion of the comments has been really striking. So we'll be coming back to you shortly. Folks, don't forget, if you are at home and you're wanting to contribute to this, it's hashtag MyBBC, We're going to be carrying on with this conversation and we're going to be moving it around the country. So please don't feel like if you've missed this, you've missed it. There's going to be plenty more to say. But Nina, if we come to you, because some of these issues that have been raised here are pretty much part of what the Sir Lenny Henry Centre put forward to a broad-based group called the Media Reform Coalition, who put together an alternative green paper. So that's the process by which the BBC's charter, ideas for the charter were going to be challenged. And I think you were one of the authors of this, and it talks specifically about the need for better representation. Can you tell us?
So I worked on the Charter Renewal Group for Audio UK because I was on the board there for 5 years, and because of the work that I was doing in the media diversity sector. So I was on the Charter Renewal Group, and a couple of key points emerged in terms of what their charter could do more for in terms of embedding diversity to make the BBC more representative and more reflective of the UK, which is actually one of its key mission statements that has been there since I think since the last charter. It was put on there that the BBC must be representative and reflective of the whole of the UK, and so to build on its what it can do. Some of the points are that the data, so I mentioned the data before, it needs to be more transparent. So it's great that this data is now being collected, but it's not always as transparent as it could be. So for example, I did some research that was looking at radio news in particular, and I wanted to know how diverse is this group of the workforce, senior leaders, because as I said, like the entry level and the progression of people in the organisation is good, but when you get to who is being made into editor, so these positions of power and influence, key positions, who are getting those jobs. And it wasn't easy to get that data, even though they hold that data. But I managed to kind of get my own, I managed to do an FOI request, Freedom of Information, and I got a figure for that. So the overall outlook in terms of what the BBC tries to do is called 50-20-12. So 50% gender diversity, 20% racial diversity, 12% disability diversity within its workforce, and that's at different levels. And I found that in the senior levels of radio news, that was only 6%. And in some areas of the regions in the UK, it was even less than that. And there were even some very all-white newsrooms, radio newsrooms that existed in the organisation.
Hold on, hold there a second. Does that surprise anybody? Quick show of hands. Anyone surprised to hear that? You're surprised that it's not representative? So the aim. This is the BBC's aim. I mean, there's discussion about where those figures come from anyway, but that's what they're aiming for.
But that's an overall
Yeah,
aim,
it
and
is,
it's doing
yeah.
very well in achieving
they
that
are.
overall aim. But it's a very broad brush. So the data could actually be more useful if you look at Birmingham. Birmingham's diversity is actually, super diverse. We have 51% racial diversity in the city. So maybe, coverage of news in Birmingham should perhaps be we should be more ambitious in our kind of, expectation of diversity and representation in Birmingham, for example.
So coming on to that research you did for the Lenny Henry Centre, which was brilliant, was picked up everywhere, loads of discussions that took off the back of it. That's part of what informed this paper here. What is it calling for?
So that on that point, it is to have more breakdown of the data, so to actually release more and publish more of the detailed breakdowns. But there are other recommendations as well. So I also worked on a document for the Lenny Henry Centre which looked at the creative diversity commitment. You might not be aware, but after the killing of George Floyd in 2020, when everybody was protesting on the streets, big anti-racism protests, everybody was putting their black squares on social media, remember that? Well, the BBC also made a commitment at that time that they were going to be launching this creative diversity commitment, which had £112 million attached to that. And the Lenny Henry Centre's work was involved in what did it achieve? We spoke to all the leaders in independent production companies in the UK, radio and TV. What happened as a result of that announcement? And so there were some recommendations that came out of that report, which were that the money, it was rather opaque, that it was actually more to do with money that was already being spent. It wasn't new money, it wasn't ring-fenced money. And so the recommendations from that were that, the BBC could do more in terms of ring-fencing, money for diverse commissioning, and also the business support and the marketing support that the BBC could give to push the programmes that are made as part of that kind of, that commissioning process.
So sort of 5 or 6 out of 10. Good ideas needing more detail, more transparency.
It's a really good start, but it's just putting the pressure on, highlighting the areas where improvements can be made. And then there's another couple of points as well around geographic diversity and disability and neurodivergence. So in terms of geographic diversity, it's really important that the BBC invests outside of London. I worked in Salford for a while. Salford had huge investment in Media City. So one of the learnings from that was, because I'm also a testament, the BBC actually shipped a lot of people who worked in London to work in Salford, but temporarily. And so the really important thing when making regional investments is to actually make sure that the investment goes into local skilling and upskilling people who are living in that region and not just moving people from London to go and live in Birmingham to work on those programmes.
And clearly that's quite important for everybody here who is Birmingham based, even if it's just for now while you're at the university. But that notion of, there being those rich kind of creative, outlets, jobs for the future. Thank you. I'll pause you there, Nina, because I definitely want Sega to say a few words, and then we have actually got Sir Lenny. We can come to him shortly, but I'm going to get you back in, though, Sega, to say, having heard from our previous two colleagues here, you stood as an artist to be the Director General of the BBC, and you put together a kind of list of the things you would have wanted to see. Does this pick up some of those issues, do you think?
Well, I mean, absolutely. And just to pick up on your last point, what I was trying to say is the BBC is there and it can lead. So moving to Salford Media City, so I had to do a thing with BBC Philharmonic with my old band Clean Bandit, and we had to go to Salford, to Media City, to record that. And now when you look at Manchester, and from a creative point of view, you've now got the MOBO Awards, which are happening tomorrow night in Manchester at Co-op Live. The Brit Awards happening in Manchester, Aviva Studios. So all of this stuff, and that was
it's really been transformative,
leading the way. So when you've got that power. And so in the same way, so in terms of when I was putting the case forward, and just to ask the question, because let's not get confused. There are people who don't want the BBC to exist. And there are people who've got complaints about the BBC. So the problem is, if we don't hear from the champions of what the BBC could be, and we don't even say to young people like you to say, actually join this battle to be a champion of this, then we're losing out, because the people who are trying to demolish it are doing a very good job, and they're well heeled. They've got all other media outlets, and you see it comes from the Telegraph, the Times, and everything else. So that's very dangerous. So I think with part of this, where the BBC isn't helping itself, really, and in this Director General application, that was an opportunity. So me running, it wasn't just to be annoying, but it was an opportunity. It was an opportunity, and I don't think they got that annoyed. But it was an opportunity to then say, okay, to ask anybody, if you're going to lead an organization, so if you're working there, you want the person to stand up and say, this is what I'm trying to do, 50, 20, 12. This is why I'm trying to do it. You know, and this is why, this is the direction. It's not just about news. It's not just about news coverage. It can be about the Natural History Unit, which is based in Bristol. It can be about, you know, children's programming. Now, in this interim period, BBC have decided to send creators to YouTube to create content for YouTube instead of being on the CBBC channel or CBBC. Ted Sandros, the head of Netflix, said on the debate program on BBC, he said, this is an error. YouTube is a challenge for us as Netflix, and it's a challenge for you as public service broadcasters. Now, let's take a step back. I think one of the great things which happened in terms of with your generation, the generation above, when you see all the YouTubers and the content creators, and you see what KSI and all of them, what they built, all these different empires. The problem that you now have is that pathway where you say, okay, BBC is not commissioning me. Now let me go to YouTube and let me try and get, or some of these other streaming or TikTok, let me try and do something there and then get exposure. The problem now is a thing called AI. AI coming along means that has closed down those avenues. So now when we come full circle, there is an opportunity where BBC, you've still got BBC West Midlands, you've still got BBC Merseyside, you've still got BBC across the country, Northern Ireland and stuff. So you've already got the infrastructure. Now it's to use that infrastructure to then say, okay, to young people, okay, we weren't giving you a chance, you've gone over there, now AI is killing you, the AI slop. Now here's a chance and an opportunity to say, okay, we didn't do it then, let's do it now. And it's public service, so we need to also think about what economic model we have as a society.
Oh, blimey, before we even get into the economics of something, we've got a comment from from our lovely students. Kiana?
My name is Kiana, I'm a journalism student, and to touch on what you said, like specifically entertainment, growing up, like we had CBBC, and that was fantastic. We had like a lot of shows and a lot of people like of colour. For me, specifically, like seeing like shows that resonated with me, like kids going to school. Also, we had BBC iPlayer, that was fantastic, and BBC got rid of that and broke my heart because we had it's not BBC iPlayer. Sorry, what was it called? BBC 3. That's it. Sorry, thank you. And that was amazing because we had like good shows, documentaries, and then we had news on it as well. And the news, growing up for me, that
BBC 3 is still
BBC
there
3
as well.
Is it?
It came back.
It came back.
So they took it off on demand. They put it only on iPlayer, but then they put it back.
Okay, well that's still a good advantage.
A young person doesn't know it's there.
And then that you actually liked it, but you didn't know.
I didn't know, but like seeing it on TV, like mainstream TV, because I still watch mainstream TV, and it was good, and it just kept like good with the updates, everything fluent. But overall, I do believe BBC. We all know every organisation can make changes and stuff. I just feel like there should be more to appeal to young audiences. I think there's social media and stuff, but a lot of people that I know, they don't really use it as such as. So I think mainstream TV as well, and seeing people like of colour, different ethnicities, more of that would be amazing.
This is a question for Sega. You're obviously quite passionate about the direction the BBC is going at the moment. What would you have done if you managed to get...
This is the $24 million question. Yeah, Sega, if you had got the job...
What was the first thing you would do?
Yeah, first thing.
New office. Do you know what? There are so many things around that. One of the things is I tap in, let's say it's looking at not just where we are now, but where we're going. Because I think this is precisely the point where we are at a crux where everybody, young or old, you're feeling lost with technology and everything else. BBC, being a musician before, it was easy because you only had a few radio stations, a few TV channels going back 20, 30 years. And then you just put on the radio, so you had a captive audience. Now you've got your phone and you've got games and you've got everything else, and iPlayer is just one square. But we've come back round and you can say, now there is an issue because social media bans are going to come in for young people. Well, I mean, how do you feel about social media ban?
A social
For
media ban?
under 16.
Let's do a very, very quick hands up. You're talking about the
Under
idea of under 16s, no social media.
It's a good
1,
thing.
2, 3. Oh, are you on that fence? 3-ish. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, and we've got 6 and 3 on. Are you on the? Yeah, 3. Right. So overwhelmingly yes to a ban, which is interesting.
So again, here you look, where are the opportunities? So one thing which baffled me is the BBC saying create more content for YouTube, for CBC, for young people to push it to YouTube. In other countries, in Australia, YouTube is social media, so that's been banned. So one of the things, again, I've got friends who are parents with young children. When you go on these other streaming things, there's so much slop on there. As you're saying, the tested, good stories and everything which has been commissioned by having good editors and then bringing in diverse editors who can cover neurodivergency, gender and race and everything else, bring in those opportunities and then have a CBeebies app. So then people know, okay, look, I know this is safe, it's publicly serviced, it's publicly broadcasting, and then you've got that whole ecosystem of everything else. Another thing, very quickly.
Is this all on day one?
Yes. Well, this is the interesting this is the interesting thing, because actually what was great is when you were talking about politics and saying, why is the coverage? Nigel Farage was on Question Time when there were no MPs. He was a UKIP. They had no MPs. Where were the Lib Dems and the Green Caroline Lucas? So it's really interesting when the BBC might look more towards Westminster and our politics, our newspapers. It all looks and patronizes young people. It patronizes, say, oh, you don't pay attention, you don't do anything, you don't know what's going on, and you've given a real great breakdown of how politics is working. So we shouldn't be patronizing young people, and then we should also be looking at different opportunities. So one of these other things is regionally, to then say, how do we now build up the different, so it's not just London-centric. I'm from London, but it should not be London-centric. I do want to know what's going on in Cornwall. I do want to know what's happening in Darlington. So this is an opportunity where you've got infrastructure, because you've got the studios there. Open them up so people can hear about the climate, whether there's flooding there. They can hear about the different issues that they have, rather than people being from heavily white areas in Scotland talking about stop the boats on the coast, on the south coast. They should be talking about the issues around them and to empower, and we've already got this infrastructure. And the worst thing that can happen now is if we don't fight for these things. The biggest robbery, I think, one of the biggest robbery was Brexit, just because it's robbing the opportunities for you to go overseas. Fine if you don't like this structure or that structure, but how has that helped you go overseas to study, to work?
I'm not going to get stuck on Brexit, because I think we could probably spend an hour on Brexit.
Yeah, I just want to say really brilliant that you stood for Director General at the BBC, and how important it is to have people who do put themselves forward for these roles, because it's quite an opaque process. Like, if anything, it's just useful to know, like, the transparency of the process. How do you go about selecting the head of an organisation? And I think it's really important for us all to, like, have buy-in to the organisation. We're all paying into the BBC for its relevance to us all. I think it's important that we know, you know, how that process occurs in terms of who is selected to head the organisation. And I would like to personally see a lot more diversity in that lineup. I was really disappointed that there were only 2 women that were in the selection lineup, and they both stood down before, you know, the final selection. So
just remind me, Nina, how many women Director Generals have there been in the 100 years?
I don't think there have been any, have
there?
there?
Been none.
No, I think
okay.
No.
Okay, Sega, we're going to come back to you, and I do want to pick up on the politics side of things, because actually lots of you are nodding about, you know, politics are really important. They engage us. You know, I don't want to get stuck into Brexit because, as I say, we could spend an hour on that, but politics is important. How might the BBC cover politics for your age group? But I've got two people waiting to speak, so over to you, and then I'll come over here.
Just coming up back on your thing, I mean, I remember, like, you know, when I was a child, I mean, Milkshake, anyone? Like, on CITV, and even, like, shows like, you know, I remember Arthur, like, that was such a really diverse show. I mean, you had Damien, like, I can't remember, it's Damien or Stephen Marley, one of them, singing the theme tune, and it was nice. It was something new. And the thing is, as well, another issue I find is that I feel like BBC sometimes they don't really go forward because technological advancements have gone further. I mean, I was literally, when I'll get working class kid, I mean, the only thing a phone I've had was a Sony Ericsson. And the thing is, you couldn't do much. You couldn't go online. You couldn't do social media. You couldn't even text anyone. Because
Sounds
that's
like
how
a good phone to me.
you know, that was the technology at the time. And the fact that now we've got smartphones, and then the fact that also the content that you can't monitor the content anymore. I mean, we've got like social, I mean, the fact that I agree with the social media ban, because it's like, you know, it really, it interrupts, you know, children's mindsets and the way children are growing, and the fact that, you know, heavily reliant on technology. And also the fact that you can't monitor that stuff. I mean, we've got Grok. I mean, Grok, like, you know, producing content which isn't monitored. And
I
the
think
fact that,
that the BBC has a lot of kind of, you know, work to do in talking to younger people or having engagement with the younger demographics about what it offers, its value, and how much you're paying for it compared to Netflix, Prime, etc. Because you're paying for Netflix now, they just put the price up and you still have to watch ads. Well, compared to BBC, which is like, what is it, £159 for the year, and you don't have any ads, you know, like, and the value that it offers you, like, there's no, I mean, I feel that there's a lot of kind of work that can be done to kind of put forward that very compelling argument about the importance of the BBC.
Yeah. Okay, we've got another comment over here.
Just really quickly, I think it's great that you went for that role, and also that you shared it, even though you didn't get that role, because you look like me. And maybe after my PhD, after a few more years, maybe I'll even go for it.
Exactly.
Because I've seen you go for it.
This is the result. Genuinely, this is the result. This is what you want to see, because otherwise it's going to be the white men that row all the time.
Yeah, it makes
like,
it real.
Let's give someone else a chance.
This is the importance of having media diversity. This is why I'm so, you know, this is why I dedicate my time to this area, campaign and advocacy work, because the media is more important to have diversity in the media than probably any other industry, because it's the formation of beliefs, stereotypes, how we view ourselves, our self-worth, our self-value. Like, it's the whole body of research that looks at the psychology of what repetitive images that we are seeing of ourselves, and that is really ultimately the most important part of having a national institution like the BBC, because it's telling us telling us about ourselves, who we are, who we could be.
Yeah, shapes our imagination of who we are and who we could be.
Is the data in that proves what Nina's saying, that you know, actually if we don't see it, you know, we need to be able to see all of the multiplicity of us?
100%. And yeah, like the whole, we made a list. I mean, you can see it in the, I'll send the link for the Unboxed report, but made a list of what good representation was looking like now. And some of the things I liked the best were not so non-tokenistic, but meaning also casual, like as in, you don't need this to be the person's whole story. Intersectional, joyful, I loved. We're not here just for trauma narratives, please.
Yeah. And we are many people, aren't we?
We are many people.
Identities.
And everywhere, so we've talked loads about workforce diversity, but there was a really, really well-rounded, and it was such a key theme. And it was actually not just about people that look like me, but people that look like people I love, people that look like people I work with, people that look like my community. That was nice.
But then saying that, I've also done a body of research around news and local news in particular, and there's still a very narrow portrayal of you know, what people of colour are being shown. So I kind of found that, you know, in local news, people of colour are seen more in the topics of arts and culture and sport, and not necessarily in these more high esteem news topics such as business people, as successful managers, as in sports. You know, so you're not having the multiplicity, you're not seeing the multiplicity of a person of colour, for example, whereas you do have that for that kind of portrayal for white people. So it's really important that we know, you know, what is being reported, what are the images that we're being shown of ourselves, and just to kind of, you know, make sure, have an accountable organisation so that it knows where it's doing well and where it could improve.
And diversity is all of us. You know, we all have, you know, various parts to ourselves. You know, it's protected characteristics, you know, cover, you know, a huge majority of us. If you look at all of that, you know, gender, I mean, that's half the population to start with. It's just, you know, we've got a whole range there. Yeah, it is pretty unarguable against, I feel. But this is only one element, in actual fact, of the alternative green paper that the Media Reform Coalition's putting forward. It's got loads of other elements to it, not just the representation side of things. Folks, I'm just kind of aware that we're moving on in time. We've got about 10 minutes left. What I want to do is to play Lenny, because Lenny has recorded something for us. And can I just hear a yeah? Do we want to hear from Lenny Henry? Yes. No, I'm sorry. Do we want to hear from Lenny Henry? Yes. Fractionally louder. Let's play it, folks. So here's Helen.
Hiya. Look around you. Do you see people like you on the BBC? And ask, if not, why not? The future of the BBC is in your hands. If people like you don't use it, will you lose it? Use the hashtag MyBBCMySay to tell us if and how you would make it better. Please do it. Thank you.
Let's hear it for Len. Let's hear it for Len. Fantastic. So this is very much about a start of something. This isn't, I mean, we've got about 10 more minutes of this particular event here, and I am aware that some people haven't had a chance to speak, so really happy and keen to get everybody, if they'd like to speak, no pressure if you'd like to speak, and then to come back to our three panellists, because believe me, they have far more to say. But it's an opportunity for us to think, you know, it is about saying, this is our BBC, folks. It is our BBC. It is there to represent us. That's all of us. And if it isn't doing it, what can we do to alter it, to make it better? I think you were saying it earlier, Nina, that it's about, you know, we want it to be better. We want it there, but we want it to be better and to be bolder at doing the things, rather than perhaps feeling a little bit like they're doing great work, huge changes, but that's 100 years of the BBC. Perhaps we could expect more.
Yeah, I mean, I think people don't understand that what you know, the importance of the charter renewal, because it's a real opportunity to kind of influence what the future BBC is going to look like, and that's also why it's important who the DG is going to be and who, you know, what is the future path going to be. And so it's a shame that you didn't get it, love. But you know,
it'll come round again, Sega.
Yeah. I mean, maybe sooner rather than later. You never know. Yeah. But in terms of, like, I mean, I'm quite interested in terms of how you feel about paying for the BBC. So in the past, there's always been like this lump sum, like whoever you are, wherever your background, wherever your income, we all just pay the same amount, an annual amount. And that has been really criticised for being a regressive tax. So, you know, somebody who owns £1 million house shouldn't have to pay the same amount of money for the BBC as somebody who's unemployed, for example. So there's a lot of different models now that are being looked at, whether it might be a subscription model, like people seem to be more kind of, you know, okay about that.
Yeah. Nush, I mean, you asked, I think, about some of this.
It came up in the conversation. Actually, because it came up in the context of young people were saying, well, hang on a minute, why don't we get a discount? Like, I'm in a house with 5 housemates, we've got loads of subscriptions already, we can't pause it, we can't treat it like our other subscriptions, like where's the kind of, so we did have that conversation and we did feed it into the report. We didn't
So
have
they
it-
want a student discount.
yeah, I mean, we didn't just talk to students. But
All
like
right,
a
yeah,
young
person
person's
discount,
discount,
yeah.
like a rail. Think of it as a rail card.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting if you
Ditto
think
with
about-
older
yeah.
people in that case, then what one might think.
Oh, yeah, my mum
People with
would love that,
disabilities,
yeah.
you know, anywhere where you're kind of measuring it in terms of income and yeah. So, graduated. Okay. Did you want to add something else to that?
Well, I just wanted to add that, you know, the work that needs to be done in terms of reflecting and representing the UK. I think it's fairly accepted the importance of having a diverse workforce and the influence of having a diverse workforce on content, right? And having worked in the organisation close up, you see the importance of that. Because it's not just like who's working on the production. So in the past, there's been a lot of emphasis on on-air representation. And I think that has sometimes led to people misbelieving that the organisation has done enough and doesn't need to do any more. And that's really like a false impression. It's been called like a performative diversity efforts. And I think rightly the emphasis now is on production roles, it's on off-camera, off-mic roles, what is diversity looking like in the workforce in those areas, and also, very importantly, at that senior leadership level. So I think maybe we do need to see a Director General, a person of colour, a person from a, different working class background, somebody who has not been Oxbridge educated, maybe this is the kind of bold step that the BBC needs to make to really, put its money where its mouth is, like to say we care about diversity to this extent, but we are going to put somebody, like Love into that kind of position,
We have got the new Director General. It's been announced today, Matt Britton, as I say. I mean, I'm wondering, we've got a few people who want to come in. I'd quite like to capture it. So he's coming into what is going to be a really, really tricky time. The next 10-year charter, politically, we don't know what's going to happen. We've got the local elections, national elections, another couple of years. There's a lot going on in the world, right? And the BBC, is having to kind of negotiate all of that. What would you ask this new Director General to do on their first day? Sega, I knew what you were going to do because you've told us, but what would your advice be, or what would your ask be for the new DG? And I'm going to ask all three of you, and then folks, I'm going to come to you to see if you've got anything different to ask.
Do you know what I'd ask? I'd ask for him to be honest and say, what does he actually stand for? Because otherwise we're just wasting our time. Like, literally, what does he stand for genuinely? And then we can see what's going on. That's what I'd like. That's what I'd like to know.
Thank you, Nina.
Well, I would probably just ask him, like, what is he? What are his views in terms of where the BBC is at right now in terms of its diversity, record.
Yeah. Okay. Noosh?
I think I would want, this is building on what you said, but I think I would want to ask him to build in the open. I think that's something I hear from your generation all the time, which is it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to fail, just own it and be transparent. So.
Transparency, yes. So getting a lot of nods from each one of those comments, but can I come finally to you here? And a quick show of hands if anyone wants to say anything final, because we are in the last couple of minutes. But what would you want from the new Director General and from the BBC in terms of any of the things we've been talking about?
I would love to see more young black presenters, because watching the news now, there's a lot of they're quite mixed, but they're more older. So I'd like to see more young females specifically.
Yeah.
I feel like
I'm on to job, but I'm quite right. She's very good.
I feel like there should be more honesty and open, because I feel like when it comes to diversity or neurodivergent or anything else, they only use that as a label to cover themselves from stuff that they should be talking about and should be getting stuff done, and actually supporting people that want to actually help them and build their own career.
Spot on.
I'd
say more conversations about mental health. I'm really big on mental health because I study psychology and counselling, and I feel like we can all agree that after COVID, it just kind of hit everyone, and a lot of people have been affected. So just, more conversations about mental health, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking as the token older person in this room, as a token very much older person in this room, it's so much better to have those open conversations rather than, a very quiet conversation in the women's loo before you come out, because you couldn't talk about things in public. So I think we're all agreed, more openness, absolutely better. Yeah. Well, it's not even weak, is it?
I would probably ask to be more included. You guys were mentioning the license fee. I'm not the only person who feels this way, but there are people who feel like, well, why should I have to pay for this, because this doesn't really represent me, this isn't really for me. So yeah, just to feel kind of more included, I'd say. I don't know what that looks like. But unfortunately, in the world that we do live in, inclusion can sometimes come with a bit of backlash, and I think that is something that should be recognised. Like, say, for instance, if you were named the new DG, I give it 2 seconds before we get a slew of online crap based on certain identities and whatnot. So yeah.
I guess, as I was talking about earlier, more political representation and more political parties. Stop giving special treatment to really small parties in Parliament right now, like Reform UK. Yeah.
We're moving on. No, I was going to say, go ahead. No, please.
I'm more of a creative person, so BBC has different channels, and I would like to see that even though the other channels are a bit more inclusive, a bit more diverse, they have less push. So a TV show about black people or even different minorities, they wouldn't be on a billboard as much as a show that everyone's been watching for probably the last 30, 20 years. So you have the inclusivity, but you're just kind of doing it again for the performativeness, not actually putting it out there. So push these tiny projects.
I would say I think probably have a more diverse, especially when it comes to children's shows. I've been thinking about the next generation. They are literally growing up, especially within this generation. You see obviously social media and you see Instagram. Obviously you kind of see all the trends, and they kind of take after those trends. And I think as they kind of grow up, they kind of feel like they're not able to kind of, I guess, build a better personality. I think have more educational shows. I think make it actually have them to be able to learn more, especially when it comes to the world as well. And I think for me personally, because I'm also from a tech background as well, so I think have more shows regarding tech, because think about technology, especially is going to be going into the 21st century as well. Tech is it's continuously evolving. So I think it's our future as well. So I think we need to have more people understand more, especially what technology especially is about.
Very swiftly, in the last few moments, let's hear from our last two who want to speak. Not everyone wants to speak.
Well, I've got a few things, but first of all, it's again, you can say all of this posh stuff on a corporate piece of paper, but what are you going to do on the street level? What are you going to do so that, let's just say Billy's walking down the street, why should he care about the BBC? Because again, you could talk about representation, but it needs to be genuine. It needs to be this person walking down the street, he should care about the BBC because it's his BBC. The second thing of all, digital rights management. Why should I have to pay a license fee to see a show again when I could go to my mate Jim from the pound shop and grab a DVD and actually preserve my content? And the final thing is just that, again, it's you may have all these schemes, but again, come on, someone coming from a street level to a working class background who is trying to get up into the industry, and then you have people who are actors, musicians, writers, and then they get a level of oh yeah, we'll pick him as a presenter, but not this kid. He hasn't got too much experience. So there needs to be a genuine level of representation, not just from a corporate level, but from a street level as well, to the average person walking around in this country.
Well, as someone from a lower South Asian background, especially from being from Wolverhampton, I'd say more inclusivity across all ranks around BBC, including journalism, media, PR and communications, you can name it, whatnot. Essentially, I'd say more transformations around actual media projects around diversity and inclusion. And bear in mind, if I were the actual diversity or potentially the element in power at the BBC, let's say I was actually Matt Stewart, I would actually question myself, well, how and why do I belong here? What is the BBC intended to do? What are they actually intended to achieve? And can they hold those in power to account?
Hardeep, thank you very much. Can I just say, folks, I mean, as I said earlier, anyone who thinks young people aren't engaged or interested or don't have comments to say or don't have information, yeah, right. Fantastic. Thank you very, very much indeed. Could we all, though, thank very much Sega, Nina and Noosh for their contributions, folks. Fabulous, fabulous. Let me just say, though, this is not the end. Hashtag #MyBBCMySay. Keep on putting any comments on that. We're going to pull all those things together. There's going to be more events like this, differently formed. They might be larger, they might be smaller, there might be small conversations dotted around the country because we actually think it's really important. It's our BBC. We want as many people to feel like they have a say. Thank you very much and goodbye for now.